Pocket Gamer events are all about networking and new faces, and that's why I'm always excited when I have a new face and a new company with funding. So Metica, Phil, first of all, congratulations on that, because it's not the climate where it's easy to get funding, and you certainly did prove it.
Thank you very much. So thanks to our investors, particular Play Ventures, they've been amazing helping us, including 13 Books as well. So and maybe a little bit about Metica. So the mission we're here for is we're helping games to grow faster. And we do that through personalization, everything in-game, making the game more personalized, and then connecting everything we do inside the game and taking the data to then help bridge the gap between what's happening in the game and UA funding and the UA side of things. So breaking down UA silos.
Also a little bit, in a way, forecasting on steroids, because I'm getting the data, but I'm getting actual insights from the data. And what I think is pretty cool, breaking down those silos, because part of it is about democratizing the data, which is what you're attacking head on.
Yes, so one thing we offer, for instance, on the website is anyone can come, give us access to the MMP data, and we'll actually provide a proper report that gives you insights, how well your UA is doing, how well the game is performing. And then based on that, we can help you either increase LTV inside of the game by optimizing your in-app purchases, optimizing rewarded ads, gameplay through a new way of personalization and optimization through what's called contextual multi-arm bandits. So that's inside the game. But all that rich data we collect is then being used to predict LTV on an individual player level. And that, again, has been taken and fed back into the ad networks. Once it's in the ad networks, you can run much more targeted and better campaigns that target much wider audiences. And from there, through the attribution that happens through the MMPs, we can take that and then personalize the game depending on where you're coming from, but also other contexts like what country you're in, if you're a spender, non-spender, if you've played similar genres before.
So when you say personalization, when you're talking about personalization, it goes beyond dynamic personalization. There's a level of context I'm hearing. There's also a level of, the persona perhaps as well. So you've got geo, you've got context, a little bit of how they're playing. So you've got player types. Bringing that all together, is that your IP?
Yes. So,
okay, well, then that's smart IP.
Yes, so we do that. And I think you're quite right. Personalization is a big topic, and a lot of people understand slightly different things by that. A lot of people think segmentation is already personalization. So our first company, we sold to King. So we worked at King for a while and built out the CRM platform. And at that point, we did a lot of segmentation. We went to even more than 15,000 segments at a time. But at that point, segments start overlapping and you don't really know anymore what treatment the customer is getting. So we are doing all the learning and everything we do on an individual player level. And from there, you can then do PLTV forecasts, you can tailor the game to an individual, and you keep adding to the context you have about an individual player.
And when you're doing that analysis, that initial analysis, I'm just curious, you're not just saying this is the LTV that you can aim for. So you're giving me, I can set my goal much more clearly. Are you also giving me sort of like the red flags and the green flags, like, hey, your AI, your UA rather, hey, your UA strategy is hitting here but missing there. So it's not just the numbers, but maybe what I need to fix, how I need to fix.
Yeah, so it's the what is potentially what can potentially be improved. So we give you that, but we do what we call actionable insights. We then also give you the tools to improve that. So not just the insights, but we also help you how to do that. So for instance, if you're optimizing your levels and you put that into our contextual multi-arm bandits, we then can have you add a lot of different variants, and the machine automatically determines which variant works for which types of players, and it will tell you which ones don't work. And we believe, especially in the era now of generative AI, this is super interesting because instead of running an A/B test where you just have 4 variants, you wait for a month or whatever period, and select a winner, here you can keep adding variants over and over and over again, and the machine will give you very quick, really good feedback what works and what doesn't. So your production pipeline increases in speed dramatically.
Very cool. So it's not just the speed of testing, that's obviously something you want to increase, but you can increase all the variants and say, well, what about this one? And a couple of the ones like from serendipity, which often turn out to be the ones, I've talked to a lot of publishers, and it's like the one thing they tried that they just thought on a whim was the one. So you've had a lot of experience, obviously doing the CRM at King, and you have that as background. So in a way, it's like bringing that knowledge, bringing that experience out to all the publishers. Otherwise, of course, they wouldn't be supporting you as well.
That's true, but even then, I think a lot of things have improved and have sort of really moved on. And what we see is the teams that are going from a mindset of individual testing to a genuine optimization, personalization mindset are the ones that are winning because everything improves. And as I said, with generative AI and everything else that's coming, you really need to be data-driven. The cycles are only going to get faster, and it's going to be harder and harder for humans to make the decisions because everything is getting so complex. If you truly believe in personalization, you need a machine that is helping you to do that.
I mean, in a way, Phil, you could have stopped with just personalization and intelligence, but you've also gone at the level of the organization, that you had to look at bringing it to all the parts of the organization. What's the thinking behind that? Is that saying that, knowledge shared is knowledge that's going to be multiplied?
That is definitely one, but a really big point I think for us has been is there's just been so many silos, especially between UA, what's happening in game, the CFOs that do the strategy, the forward planning, and we just see a massive opportunity by actually connecting all of them through data, and that they can actually work with each other, and often not just alongside of each other. So we believe that is sort of a big area where improvement comes from, and we're already seeing it. By connecting the dots, we're already seeing very considerable uplift.
And you mentioned CFOs, so I met your company, everybody, hanging out at the Mobile Finance Collective. So this is this idea that, CFOs in games companies have to have a deeper understanding because games start as most times a great idea and then a great business. So what role does the CFO play in this? Are you trying to give that CFO more visibility, and for what reason?
So obviously the game team making the game, they're absolutely pivotal to a gaming company because without a great game, you don't have a business. But then there are also other very much unsung heroes often within a gaming company, which is on the UA side, driving the installs and growing the game, but also the CFOs, because they do the forecast, they make sure the money is there to actually scale the game. And as you said, it's important for them to have insights, but also for them to be able to predict and forecast how the game is doing going forward, especially if your game is IAP monetized. Often the payback is over 180 days, 360, sometimes even 720. So they do need to have extremely good forecasts and accurate data to make predictions and make sure the right investment is being made.
So how long exactly have you been around now? And what has your experience been? What have you been seeing? Maybe also some surprises in the types of companies that want to work with you.
So we've been around for 2 years. We've been very fortunate that we had quite a few gaming companies we could actually develop the product with. So big shout out to Phoenix Games, Starberry, and quite a few others who were great from day one. So what are we seeing is the message resonates very well. I think breaking down the silos, people totally buy into. They see that generative AI and everything else that's happening in that space is really accelerating development. And what we're also seeing is that some teams are extremely hungry to change their mindset, get faster, do more optimization, personalization, but not everyone. So we get asked quite often, what is sort of the ideal genre for you to work with? We're now working with games from social casino all the way to hyper casual. So we can work, with any genre. But what's I think more important is, and that's often something to think about, especially when you build a new game, is how configurable is the game? Because if you start personalizing, the game needs to be able to make these changes, adapt to each player. So that's sort of something we've seen, that there is a big divide on what some games are being able to do in terms of making these changes, and others being quite static, hard-coded. And that's something sort of we're talking a lot about, especially to new game developers. How can they start making a game more development, like more dynamic from day one?
What I'm also hearing here is we used to think about you have to build your monetization model in at the start. And I think increasingly, because segmentation is so important, you need to build in your personalization, your personas. How are you going to make it possible that the game is tailored to the player? So starting early with that data, and I think that probably you can play a role in backwards engineering that. I don't need to come to you with all the data. I can come to you with some of it, and then you're architecting my personalization strategy as well.
Yes, so it's a very good point. Like, most games have very different data they're collecting. I mean, overall it's similar, but there are always differences. So one is, we can actually look at your data and help you understand, do you need to collect something else? Or we've actually built a layer where you can just give us all of your events, and we're basically combining them and doing sort of cleanups and conversions in real time. So we can do that for you. But I think the more important bit is really about, when you look at, for instance, rewarded ads, can you change the reward? What placements do you have? How is that controllable directly on the client or through your back end? I think that's something we'll be seeing more and more, that games just genuinely become more dynamic. So things can be changed. Development cycles are a lot quicker as well.
And that's interesting feedback to put in there, because it is about understanding where and when to motivate. Rewards are one way of doing that. Then there's the player progression. All of this comes together. I mean, personalization is clearly a lever that we have, and we're not using it as much. We heard about creative. Now we're getting to personalized creative. So it's all going in that direction. Could you give me an idea of working with companies, like the uplift you've seen, the benefit you've seen, trying to quantify why it's worth the effort and what we can aim for?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. And I know that a lot of studios have been burned, to be honest, by quite a few vendors who promise crazy things. They say, we do this little thing, or we send one push notification, and I'm exaggerating a bit, but you get 40% uplift.
Yeah.
And clearly that's not the case. So what we are doing is we're looking at the whole growth loop. So from what's happening in the game, how's that data then used in UA? How do you drive new installs? And we are seeing the best results when we touch the game at different touch points. So when we help you optimize your ad targeting, for instance, then welcome these players through great real-time attribution in the game with a tailored experience. Great conversion offer, for instance, getting players to reveal themselves quite early on in the game, and then putting things in front of them that are relevant. So when you follow these things, they start building on top of each other. So you get the 1 + 1 + 1 = 6, 7, 8.
Because of the feedback loop.
Yeah. So what we're seeing is anywhere uplift between 16% to over 40%. But again, it's not like something you just turn on day one and it magically, fixes a leaky bucket or improves your LTV. It's really about working in a partnership with the game teams, looking at, okay, where are the biggest levers, and what can we do over time to get to that number and optimize.
And working in partnership, which is what you're doing. You're here talking with publishers, building those relationships, those partnerships as well. What is it that you have taken from the show that you're going to take back to the office, maybe potentially to improve what you're doing at Metica?
So I think, first of all, it's amazing event Pocket Gamers put together. I think it's probably one of the biggest ones in London ever.
It is the biggest in 11 years now. So seriously.
It does feel like the biggest show in Europe at the moment. So I think the buzz, everyone is keen. I think we also really like it's in January, early on in the year. Everyone is buzzing, and there's a lot of momentum. I think what we'll take back is that the games are looking for the next wave of where can they improve. Ad buying is still very tough out there for everyone. So everyone is looking for the incremental gain. I think the time of where there's a silver bullet, you turn on a new ad channel and suddenly, everything is good. I think these times are over. So everyone is looking, okay, how can we be more strategic with data? Where can we make changes? And that's not just, through us, but even, I had quite a few conversations with people that are really changing all of their graphics inside, the art style. So people are actually willing to make really big, bold changes to compete in the market. And that's exciting to see.
I like that. Big, bold changes. That's a perfect way to end this, because it is a very big, bold move at Metica. I'll be watching you. And yes, you have your funding just very recently, I believe, correct?
Yes, we just closed before Christmas. So it was the best Christmas present.
Exactly. The best Christmas present ever. I can imagine those celebrations. Nothing like that. So absolutely, Phil. I'd love to hear more from you, maybe later on in the year. And thanks so much for a bold conversation as well.
Thank you, Peggy.
This show is all about how to do your job better, how to make an amazing game, how to market it, and you have a say. So if you have a story or know someone we need to shine a light on, then we would love to hear from you.
We want to hear from you. We want to reflect the reality of the mobile games market in all its wonderful complexity and strangeness. So if you have any suggestions for us, if you have any feedback for us, you can always get in touch. You can email us at podcast@pocketgamer.biz. You can find us on Twitter @PGBiz, and you can reach out to us through the pocketgamer.biz website. If you're interested in listening to all of our podcasts, you can find them at pocketgamer.biz/podcast, and we would love to hear your thoughts on future shows.
And we've got you covered on all the major platforms, so subscribe to the audio podcast, as Brian said. Look for us on YouTube. If you want to read it, hey, you can do that too, because we have a companion post for you as well on the pocketgamer.biz website.
Tune in again for the next edition of the pocketgamer.biz podcast, and we look forward to speaking to you in the near future. Until then, I'm Brian Baglow.
I'm Peggy Anne Salz, and that's a wrap until next week.